Today we are going to talk about Pythagorean Theorem. Some backstory here. Pythagoras was the name of a person, and that person was a Greek philosopher, and he found a really special relationship between the side lengths of right triangles. Because a guy named Pythagoras found it, the relationship is called Pythagorean Theorem. It essentially says that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. Make that stand out on your page somehow. Highlight it, put a box around it, draw some stars, throw some glitter. Make that stand out on your page. You're going to refer to this a lot. Before we really dive into that, let's talk about some vocabulary. A right angle is just an angle that has a measure of 90 degrees. It looks something like that. Hold a box. It's designated with a little box like that as well. Adjacent means side by side. Next to, side by side, or to be joined with. Essentially, it just means that the two things are touching each other. The leg are the sides adjacent to the right angle in a right triangle. I want you guys to note that these are the shorter sides. The shorter sides in right triangles. The hypotenuse is the side across from the right angle. In a right triangle. This is the longest side in a right triangle. Circle the bullet point for leg and write A and B by it. Circle the bullet point for hypotenuse and write C. Pythagorean theorem states that a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. It's important to know that this only is used with right triangles. It only works for right triangles, nothing else. Here I've got a right triangle. The right angle is the one with a measure of 90 degrees. I can fit my box here. Let's label this right triangle real quick. Legs are the things adjacent to the right angle. Circle the right angle. Your right angle touches this side and this side, so those are the legs. Leg, leg. Legs are either letter A or B, it doesn't matter. You're going to name one of them A and one of them B. I'm going to call that one A and that one B. It doesn't matter which one you use because those are they're both legs. The hypotenuse is across from the right angle. It's the side that only sees the right angle, it doesn't touch it. So this is the hypotenuse, and it can see the right angle, but it doesn't touch it. It's directly across from the right angle. So we can use Pythagorean theorem in solving equations to find missing side lengths, and we do that to find a missing side length. We'll first write the formula, plug in what we know, and solve the equation. The formula is Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The second step is to plug in what we know. Before I can do that, I should label my triangle. Here's the right angle, so I'll circle it. That circle goes over this side and this side. So those are my legs, which means those are A and B. I'll call this A and I'll call this B. That means that the thing across from the right angle is C. That's the hypotenuse. It only sees the right angle. It doesn't touch it. Anyways, now I can plug in what we know. I'll put a bubble in place of A, a bubble in place of B, and a bubble in place of C. And these are all squared numbers. We know that A, this bubble's in place of A, and A is 3. This bubble is in place of B, and B is 4. This bubble is in place of C, and we don't know what C is, so that's going to stay as a letter, or a variable. Now we're ready to, we've just plugged in what we knew. We first wrote the equation, next we plugged in what we knew. Now we're just going to solve this equation. Before I can solve it, I need to evaluate this side. 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9, plus 4 squared. Well, 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16, equals C squared. 9 plus 16 is 25. I'm going to drop down that C squared again because I haven't used it. Now we have 25 equals C squared. This is a squared number, so 25 is a squared number. To undo the squared, we do the square root. So we're going to do the square root of 25 to get C. The square root of 25 is 5, because 5 times 5 is equal to 25. This means that C, or the hypotenuse, is 5 units long. Looking at the next example here, first I'm going to write Pythagorean Theorem down. That's A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I need to plug in what I know. Before I can do that, I need to label my triangle so that I know what I know. Here's the right angle. I'm going to circle it. That circle goes over this side and this side, which means that is A and B, leaving this side to be C, which makes sense because it is directly across from the right angle. It only sees the right angle, and the hypotenuse can only see the right angle, or it's directly across from that right angle. Now that I've labeled my triangle, I'm ready to plug in what I know because I know the things now. I'll put a bubble in place of all of those letters. This bubble is in place of A. A is 13. This bubble is in place of B. B is 14. This bubble is in place of C. We don't know what C is, so it'll stay as a letter. Now we're ready to solve. On the left side, I can say 13 squared is 13 times 13, or 169. And I know that 14 squared, there's a plus sign, 14 squared is 14 times 14, which is 196. And on the right side, we will just drop down the C squared. Now on the left side, I have 169 plus 196. When we add those together, we get 365 equals C squared. To go from C squared to C, we have to undo the square. We undo a square by taking the square root. So we'll take the square root of 365. That's going to tell us what C is. You can use your calculators. So you're looking at the square root second x squared of 365. There we go. And the square root of 365 is 19.10497, and that just keeps going forever. That is an irrational number. It is about equal to C. We'll round this to the tens place. So C is 19.1. For more help on rounding, feel free to check out the videos before this. So we do quite a bit of rounding in the video before this. Look at the video titled Imperfect Squares. I'm going to be picky about my math notation here. C is almost equal to, or about equal to, 19.1. Looking at the next example, first we write down the formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Then I need to plug it in, but I don't know what I know yet, so before we do that, we'll actually label the triangle. I'm circling the right angle. That touches this side and this side, which means that is A and B. Leaving this side to be C, which makes sense, it's directly across from, it only sees the right angle. Ready to plug my numbers in. This is the second step. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay. A squared will be 13 squared. B squared will be 8 squared. This bubble's in place of c. We don't know what c is, so that'll stay as a variable. On the left side, I've got 13 to the power of 2, 13 squared, which is 169, plus 8 squared is 64. And on the right side, we will just drop down the c squared. Now we've got 169 plus 64, which is 233. Equals c squared. To undo the square, we take the square root. So the square root of 233 is equal to c. Using your calculator, you can find the square root of 233. The square root of 233 will round to the nearest tenths place. That'll be 15.3. We're rounding to this number, so we look at the 6, which is 5 or more, so we add 1 to the 2, making it 15.3. Looking at the next triangle, I want to find a missing side length, so first I write down Pythagorean Theorem. Next, I'm ready to fill in what I don't know, or what I do know, I'm sorry. So before I can do that, I have to label my triangle, circle the right angle. That circle crosses this side and this side. So that's A and B, which means this is C. I'm going to put a bubble in place of all of my letters, all of the variables. This bubble's in place of A, and A is 12. This bubble's in place of B. We don't know what B is, so that'll stay a letter. This bubble's in place of C. C is 15. On the left side, 12 squared is 144, plus b squared equals 15 squared is 225. We want to solve for b, so I should get b squared by itself by moving 144 to the right side, and I move that by making a 0 pair, or subtracting 144 from both sides. So we subtract 144 to make 0, and we're left with b squared equals 225 minus 144 And 225 minus 144 is 81. That means b, to undo the square, is the square root. B is the square root of 81. Well, the square root of 81 is 9. So b equals 9. That's because 9 times 9 is 81. The next example says that the legs are 9 and 12. So that's got to be A and B because the legs have to be A and B. Now we want to find C. The very first thing we do is write down the formula A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Now we can plug that in. A bubble for A, a bubble for B. That should be a squared, not another little b. And then a bubble for C. This bubble's in place of A, and I said A was 9. So we've got 9 squared. This bubble's in place of B, we called 12b. So this is 12 squared. This bubble's in place of C. We don't know what C is, so that'll stay as a letter. 9 squared is 81, plus 12 squared is 144. 81 plus 144 is 225. Oops, I forgot to drop down C squared. Drop down C squared again. To undo this square, we need to take the square root. So now we've solved for C. The square root of 225 is 15. Because 15 times 15 is 225. I want to find the missing side length in what I presume is a triangle. I'm going to tell you it is a triangle. This is a right triangle, so I can use Pythagorean Theorem. So we've got a squared plus b squared equals c squared. They've labeled A, B, and C for me already, which means now I can just plug it in. I've got a bubble for A, a bubble for B, and a bubble for C. This first bubble's in place of A, and A is 8. The next bubble's in place of B, and we don't know what B is, so we're going to leave that as a number, or a variable. The last bubble's in place of C, and C is 14. 8 squared on the left is 64, plus b to the second power is just b squared. And then 14 squared, that looks like a 6. 14 squared is 196. We want b squared by itself so that we can eventually solve for b. So we have to get rid of the 64 by undoing it, making 0 on that side. 64 minus itself makes 0. Now we have b squared equals 196 minus 64. We get 132. Now we know b squared is 132. To go from b squared to b, we need to undo the square. We undo the square by taking a square root. So we need the square root of 132. We get the square root second x squared of 132. Close the parentheses. Now we have that b is about 11.4891259, and so on. It's an irrational number. Let's go ahead and round to the hundredths place. So we'll say c is 11.4. We're saying c is 11.49. My video is frozen, so you can enjoy this frozen still of my hand. That was the last example on this page. Your homework is the next page, page 106. It is just 8 questions on the front. Oh, it unfroze itself. This is amazing. There we go. C is about 11.49. Just a friendly reminder, this is page 105 on the front. And since my video is no longer frozen, I would like to look at number 2 with you guys. Here's number 2. We want to know how long is the tabletop, how long is the diagonal across the tabletop is, oh sorry, know how long, the length. My bad. We want to know this side, the length. Here I see a right triangle, and I know how to find the missing side in a right triangle. I'm just going to redraw the right triangle. This is 3, 6, and this is what they're calling L for length. To find the missing side in a right triangle, we first write down Pythagorean Theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Before I can fill in what I know, I'm going to label my triangle. Here's my right angle. That circle crosses this side and this side. So that's A and B, which means that 6 is C. Now for my second step, I put bubbles in place of all of the letters. This bubble's in place of A, and A is 3. This bubble's in place of B. B is L. You can put an L or you can keep it a B, up to you. I'm going to put an L. This bubble is in place of C, and C is 6. On the left side, 3 squared is 9. L squared is L squared. And then 6 squared is 36. We need to undo the 9 because we want to get L squared all by itself. So we subtract 9 from both sides. On the left side, 9 minus 9 is a 0 pair. So we're left with L squared equals 36 minus 9 is 27. To undo the square here, we have to take the square root. So we're taking the square root of this number 27. And this is telling us to round to the nearest tenth if necessary. It might be necessary if we don't have a perfect square. So we've got the square root of 27, which is 5.19615, blah, blah, blah. We want to round to the nearest tenth place, so I look at the 1. Look behind the 1, that's a 9. Since that's 5 or more, we're going to add 1 to the 1. So 5 point, and then 1 plus 1 is 2, so 5.2. So we're saying L is about 5.2, and we're measuring in feet, so this is 5.2 feet. Now look at number 8. It's got the right angle labeled, but this is a weird triangle tilted on its side, like on the right angle like that. Here's the right angle. That crosses this side and this side, which means this is A and B. So across from that right angle is C. This is page 106 on the front. This is the homework. If you have questions about the homework or any of the content in this video, please reach out to me, send me a message on Schoology. through email, or you can drop a comment on this video, and I will get back to you as soon as I can.